you so much for your leadership this evening and tomorrow and beyond. Second, if you're on the phone and you want to ask a question throughout this call, you can press *3 to connect with one of our operators. We'll have time for questions throughout the call, and I'll take them as they come in. Right now, we have 7,000 people on this call, and more are dialing in as we speak. Thousands of more are watching on the webcast and on Facebook Live. I am incredibly heartened to have you all here with us tonight because we're going to need every single one of us to take action in the coming days, coming weeks, and months to stop Trump's dangerous and reckless march to war. And that's why we're hosting, all the groups on this call and dozens of others. We're hosting No War with Iran events across the country tomorrow night. You can find an event near you at nowarwithiran.org. So please go to that website, sign up, join us out on the streets tomorrow night to show the palpable anti-war majority won't stand for this. So in a few minutes, we'll hear from my friend, who I'm honored to be on this call with, Jamal Abdi from the National Iranian American Council, Representatives Barbara Lee and Ro Khanna, Stephen Miles from Win Without War, Brittany DeBarros from About Face Veterans Against the War, and Senators Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. It's a packed agenda, so let's get started. So again, if you're just joining us, I'm Rana Epting. I'm the Executive Director at MoveOn, and I'm so grateful for all of you who have joined us here tonight. I stepped into this role a little over 3 months ago, and it's quite a time to take on the reins of this organization in this moment that we're in this country. We are in a defining moment in our country, and each and every one of us is doing all we can to resuscitate our democracy from the grip of a president who has abused his oath of office. He's ignored democratic norms. He cheats, lies, and steals, and continues to tear us apart from one another, feeding hate, and now throwing us into a dangerous escalation towards war. And this is very personal to me. I'm an Iranian American. I have family here in the U.S. I grew up in the United States, and I have family in Iran. And when we're talking about a march to war with another country, whether it's Iran or Iraq or any country in this world, we're talking about threatening the livelihood of our families, violating the soil that our family members live on, destroying the history of civilizations. So even if we're talking about another country here tonight, it would still be personal to me because we are all bound together. We are all human. So there is nowhere I'd rather be than with all of you through the phone line, because this is what gives me hope, is what fuels my existence. What inspires me is when we all come together to fight for something better. And we know another way is possible. We will not be fooled into another war. And I just thank you for being here tonight and for everything that you have done and that you will do to stop this country from marching towards war. So we have a packed agenda. And that's because war impacts so many of us in many different ways. And so many of us so care so deeply to make sure that this country doesn't go into this situation again. So we're honored to be here with all of our guests. My job tonight is to make sure we have a smooth, engaging call and that everybody gives each other enough time to talk because we have a lot of speakers. So I'll do my best to make sure that we do that. And I'll be moderating some questions from those of you on the call. So again, if you have a question, if you're on the phone, you can press *3 at any time and you'll be connected to one of our moderators to ask that question. All right? Okay. So we're going to start with my friend Jamal Abdi, president of the the National Iranian American Council. And thank you so much for being here, Jamal. Jamal is a leading advocate who monitors policies and legislation that impact Iranian Americans. He served as a congressional advisor, a liaison, and expert on foreign affairs, immigration, and defense. And he'll speak to how the Iranian diaspora is responding and domestic civil rights implications as a result of Trump's recent action. So, Jamal, we are so honored to have you here with us tonight, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Rana, and thanks everybody for being here. This has been maybe one of the toughest weeks that I've had under the Trump administration, which is saying a lot. And for our community, traumatizing, it's challenging. Donald Trump's Iran policy has been an utter disaster. It's put us on the brink of war, and it's really made life hell for the Iranian people and for Iranian Americans. So Iranian Americans were a community who largely came to the United States in the late 70s and early 80s. My dad came here in 1978 during the Islamic Revolution and during the Iran-Iraq War. And many of our families came here to leave behind a repressive government and to escape a disastrous war. And so because we're a young community, many of us still have really strong ties to our families back in Iran. And so I want to scream every time I hear Donald Trump or Mike Pompeo try to claim that they support the Iranian people, or that their Iran policy is about freedom or democracy for Iranians, or that they respect the heritage and the culture of Iranians and Iranian Americans. The fact is, one of Trump's first acts in office was to impose a Muslim ban, which to this day bans my family members in Iran from visiting me here. I know many people, friends, people that are members of our organization who are separated from their fiancés, separated from their spouses, whose families have to attend their weddings on Skype because of the ban. And so now with the rising tensions with Iran, many of us are fearful about further assaults on our rights. This past weekend, there were dozens, at least 60 Iranian Americans detained at the U.S. border with Canada for as many as 11 hours for questioning. Many of them had young children with them and had no idea what was going on. And we can only imagine what is going to happen with this administration if a full-blown war breaks out. Meanwhile, this administration has tried to cultivate its own Iranian-American version of Ahmad Chalabi, the Iraqi exile who helped spearhead the campaign for that disastrous invasion. And so Mike Pompeo has held meetings with Iranian Americans to try to cultivate them. The State Department even got caught funding an organization that was attacking Iranian American analysts and human rights advocates and organizations like mine who dared to disagree with Donald Trump's policy. So we are united with all of you to try to stop this war. And it goes even deeper than that. It's the things that have set up this war. It's the collective punishment of sanctions. It's the exiting the Iran deal that Iranians celebrated on the street. It's the undermining of organic movements inside of Iran pushing for democracy and greater rights. And so I hope that together with all of you, we can work together to put an end to the endless sanctions and the escalations, and hopefully together put Iran and the U.S. back on a path of diplomacy rather than military conflict. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, Jamal. And I just want to say, it's a long-term campaign and something that we need to do for a while in order to push this administration away from a march to war and aggressive foreign policy and back toward progressive diplomacy. But in this moment where we're seeing escalations from this president and this administration, it is very important for us to come together and show the anti-war majority visibly. So tomorrow night, we're doing No War with Iran events all across the country. In less than 24 hours, hundreds of people have come forward to plan more than 250 events in 42 states. And we must show the world and make it clear to Congress that we do not support Trump's war. So we're going to take a poll before we go on to the next speaker, which I'm very excited to introduce. But here's a question for everybody on the phone. Will you commit to attend a No War with Iran event in your community tomorrow? That's Thursday, January 9th, and those are at 5 p.m. local time. So press 1 on your phone if you will commit to go to an event in your community. That's Thursday at 5 p.m. local time. Press 2 on your phone if you will host an event in your community on Thursday. And press 3 if you can't attend or host an event, but you will call your member of Congress. There's something we all can do. You can go to an event, you can host it, or you can call your member of Congress. So please do that now. And let's see the live results. We have 1,300 people that have committed tonight on this call to attend an event. Over 60 people so far to host an event. So that's 80 now. 80 more events that we can have on our list. And close to 2,000 are going to call their members of Congress. So we need to get those call numbers up. But that is incredible for this moment. So go to nowarwithiran.org and you can find an event near you or sign up to host an event as well. All right. So next up, I am so honored to invite Senator Elizabeth Warren from Massachusetts onto the call. Senator Warren is a progressive champion. I don't need to tell any of you that. You know that. You might know her for her record on domestic policies to fight back against Wall Street and fight for all of us. But she has also been a strong voice for foreign policies that are informed by fact and advance our national and global interests, from fighting climate change to supporting the Iran nuclear deal. Thank you for joining us, Senator Warren. I know you've got a busy schedule. We're so honored to have you.
Oh, thank you, Rana. I so appreciate your having me here. And I want to say a special thank you to Win Without War and NIAC and About Face for the work that all of you are doing to organize the No War National Day of Action event tomorrow. I think this is really inspiring. I just want to talk for a minute about what's happening with Iran. There seems to be a pause in the hostilities for now, and I hope it endures. But let's be clear. This is a crisis of Donald Trump's making. The first job of the President of the United States is to keep America safe. But this president's reckless actions have made us far less safe. He started this back in 2018 when he tore up the Iran nuclear deal. Iran had agreed not to advance its nuclear program, and the international community had already certified that Iran was following the terms of the deal. Our allies wanted to stay in it, but not Donald Trump. Instead, he just decided to tear it up. And then he has taken an increasing number of steps, escalating the situation with Iran, and ultimately, of course, killing Soleimani. Right now, we're in a place where we have stopped our actions with our allies to contain and defeat ISIS. We've had to pull American civilians out of the region for fear of their safety. And we have a president who is tweeting threats of war crimes by attacking Iran's cultural sites. This is not making America safer, and it is wrong. This is the moment that Americans need to speak up and say, we do not want another war in the Middle East. We do not want a war with Iran. War with Iran would be bad for us, bad for the region, and bad for the world. All three of my brothers served in the military, and our military will do anything we ask them to do. But the commander-in-chief has a responsibility to understand that we should not ask our military to try to solve problems that cannot be solved militarily. We do not want war. So thank you all for getting out there and organizing. Be strong out there tomorrow. Let's make our voices heard.
Thank you so much, Senator. Thank you for joining us and for all the work you've done and continue to do. And thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
Right now we have thousands of people on this call and live streaming with us, close to over 7,000 folks right now, which is great. I want to remind you, if you have a question, you can press *3 and you'll be routed to an operator and they'll take your question. And I'm going to ask the first question here right now. And this question's for Jamal. And Andrew in Rhode Island asks, in light of the de-escalation rhetoric, what should the talking points be for anti-war individuals when speaking to family, friends, and politicians?
Well, we need to not take our eye off of how we got to this point. And the fact is that the policy has not changed. The United States is not in the nuclear deal and is imposing these horrible sanctions, food and medicine being denied to ordinary people. And that's happening in our name, in the name of American citizens and voters. And unless that changes, this is going to continue. There's going to be another flare-up. We have to get back to the negotiating table with Iran. And we have to remember that Donald Trump inherited the best U.S.-Iran situation of any president since Jimmy Carter. We had talks with Iran. We had a deal with Iran. We were out of the woods, we thought. And Donald Trump, it took him 3 years to take us right to the brink of war. So there has to be a more fundamental change, and this president has to be restrained from doing anything else like he did this past week that could trigger another total flare-up.
Thank you so much. So we're going to go to another speaker, but I want to remind folks to press *3 if you have questions. We're happy to take them. I'm honored to introduce Brittany DeBarros, the organizing director for About Face, Veterans Against the War. Brittany deployed to Afghanistan for a year in 2012, and she's worked on economic and racial liberation issues in various ways since she returned. Thank you for being here tonight, Brittany. Can you talk a bit about the legacy of the U.S. failed intervention in the region and what you're hearing from troops?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. It's an honor. I want to start by saying that this has been a very raw 48 hours for me. I was a captain in the Army until only a few months ago. I left for that 2012 deployment that you mentioned, believing what I was told by our leadership, that I was going to save and protect Afghan people and fight for security that could lead to peace. When I came home, though, after a year of violence and suffering up close, I was positive that I had done nothing but contribute to further harming the Afghan people, and came home with an overwhelming sense of grief and betrayal. I needed to understand why we were there, why my commander-in-chief had used my willingness to sacrifice for what I believed in so recklessly, why my Congress had abdicated responsibility for ensuring that I would be on the right side of justice in doing so. I need to understand why people barely paid attention to entire wars still raging, and why in the few moments that they did, there was no mention or concern at all for the thousands of Iraqi and Afghan civilians being killed each year. Fast forward to the present, and these wars have been unpopular among civilians and the military for years, but the Congress continues to fail to revoke the irresponsibly broad authorization for use of military force, sometimes called the AUMF, that they passed 18 years ago to launch them, the same document that the White House cited to claim authority for Trump's reckless assassination. For the past 48 hours, like I said, I've been racked with a familiar sense of grief and betrayal, and I'm certain that hundreds of thousands of active military families, and veterans have felt the same. Meanwhile, defense corporations who contribute to campaigns for over 500 members of Congress and receive almost half of the military budget instead of what we claim is supposed to support the troops, in return have seen their stocks soar. That is the reality of war for power and profit that we're in, and we have been in, and that is immoral. And I think many of us who believe in justice have hesitated to speak out loudly and boldly against war and military issues for a long time because we feel ill-equipped or fearful of insulting troops or veterans. And so I'm here excited that you all are here to say that this crisis has showed us that we absolutely cannot afford that silence and hesitation anymore. We must call our Congress members tomorrow morning and demand they pass legislation to block further aggression. We must get in the streets tomorrow and make our refusal to allow more of this betrayal to be seen and heard. And we must commit to continuing to take action once this crisis has died down to ensure that those AUMFs get revoked and that we reallocate those resources to things that can actually contribute to growth and peace and positive things for humanity in our communities.
Thank you, Brittany. So we're going to take some more questions. Those are incredibly profound words, and we are so grateful for your sacrifices for this country. For those of you that are on the call, if you're a member, are you a member of the military, a veteran, or a member of a military family? We would appreciate to know how many vets or military families we have on the call. You can press 1 if you're an active military member. You can press 2 if you are a veteran. And if you can press 3 if you're a member of a military family. And those polling results will come in. Thank you so much, Brittany. We do have some questions. Deanna asked, is there any way Congress can hold Trump accountable or be charged for a war crime for assassination of a general of a sovereign country without declaration of war? I think I will ask Jamal to answer that question. So is there any way Congress can hold Trump accountable for the assassination of General Soleimani?
Well, the best way to hold him accountable will be in November. We're going to do everything we can on the Hill, and I think other folks will talk about passing measures to restrain the president's authority or authorization for the use of military force and put real barriers in place. It's obviously going to be tough with a Republican Senate, and hopefully we kick him out of office in November, and it'll be easier to potentially prosecute some of the crimes that he's committed.
Right. Thank you so much. And I also think, although it's not holding him accountable is important, and at the ballot box is probably the best way. But the other thing that we need to do is make sure that those in Congress prevent and do everything they can to prevent him from continuing to escalate this, so to pull back from the brink of war. And so we're seeing Speaker Pelosi and the House get ready to vote on a war powers resolution, I think, in the coming days. So I'm going to do one more question, and then we're going to introduce our next speaker. That question is, and I'll ask Brittany to answer this question. Michael asked, so after the protest tomorrow, what are folks' next move?
Absolutely. So there is a lot in the works, and that's part of why we asked the poll. In this moment in particular, communities like veterans, military members, and military families can be particularly powerful in lifting up their voices to speak and correct people about the fact that it's not, supposedly unpatriotic or, not supporting the troops to speak out. And so, it's important to respond to that poll so that we can follow up about possible ways to be involved, and then create space for folks who are connected to Iraqi and Iranian communities in particular to also have a voice to be able to speak out about what's happening and speak the truth. And ultimately, I think we need to get really serious about never being willing to compromise on the matter of war. I think we often prioritize other justice issues for understandable reasons, but war is the culmination of all violence, gender violence, racial violence. It destroys our planet. And we can't allow that to continue to happen. So we need to make sure that we're incorporating that into all of the social justice work that we do, and always holding that when we go to the polls.
Thank you so much, Brittany. I'll also add, there is a large coalitional effort of about every progressive organization you can think of that is really focused on figuring out how we can come together in a much larger movement to continue to collaborate and stand in solidarity and be a consistent, sustained anti-war majority in this country. If you go to nowarwithiran.org and sign up for an action, you will be on that list. We will continue to be able to communicate with you and notify you when there are strategies and tactics that we'll be engaging in that will be impactful to continue to put pressure on Congress and the administration to turn back to a diplomacy posture. So before I introduce the next speaker, I wanted to remind folks we have a packed agenda. We have incredible speaker lineup. We have Representative Barbara Lee, Representative Ro Khanna. We have Senator Bernie Sanders, Stephen Miles with Win Without War, and more. So please stay on. This is going to be a very valuable discussion. So next up, we are going to hear from Representative Barbara Lee. Representative Lee, we are so honored to have you here tonight. For those who don't know, Representative Lee has built her career working for justice and peace in domestic and foreign policy. In 2001, the Congresswoman was the sole vote against the 2001 AUMF, and she has been a longtime advocate for ending the United States' prolonged military conflicts around the world. Today, she is in House Democratic leadership, and we are all better for it. We're so thankful to have you with us tonight, Representative Lee.
Thank you, Ron, very much for that very warm and gracious introduction. And I want to thank you for your tremendous leadership. Also, Steve, from Win Without War, thank you both for inviting me to join this call. And I really want to thank you for your continued advocacy on these life or death issues. let me take a moment to salute and thank our veterans and members of our military who are on the line. I consider myself, and you may want to put me in the poll, as a member of the military family. My dad served 25 years in the Army, and he was a proud veteran, and he served in 2 wars. And he was the first one who called me after I voted against the blank check after the horrific events of 9/11 and told me that was the right vote, to stand firm, and that I dare not send our brave men and women into harm's way unless we knew the costs and consequences and what the heck we're doing. And so I just want to thank our veterans and our military families and members of the military for your service. And just know we're going to do everything possible to make sure that we do not send you into harm's way, and that we provide what is necessary for you here at home. Move on and win without war are so critical to the continued resistance to Trump's march to war. And so thank you again for your advocacy and work. I'm really pleased to say that Move On, I have to take a little credit for Move On being founded in Berkeley. And that really speaks to not only my district, but the continued growth of the organization and their forward-thinking approach. I remember when the petitions were brought to Capitol Hill, to the Longworth building many years ago when Move On was just founded around, I believe it was around the Clinton impeachment. So I just have to thank you for staying the course, and very proud of the work that you do. Also, I need to thank Congressman Connor for joining the call today and for his tremendous leadership on these resistance issues and continuing the drumbeat against Trump's divisive agenda on so many fronts. Ro is such a great leader, and I'm really happy he's on this call. And also, you know that I'm outraged by Trump's reckless decision that has put us on the brink of an illegal, unauthorized, and catastrophic war with Iran. Donald Trump should have come to Congress to seek an authorization and a vote before undertaking a unilateral act of war, and that's what this was. We need all of you in the public to weigh in with Congress so we can put a check on this irrational and irresponsible president. We can't let him drag us into this war with no end in sight and no congressional authorization and no plan for diplomacy. It's really outrageous. We need to demand that the White House provide the public with any evidence of Iran being an imminent threat, justifications for the assassination and the malicious strike, and the Trump administration's false claims that the 2002 AUMF could justify future military actions against Iran. As some have already said on the phone, the public does not want war with Iran. Let me be clear. Trump's actions alone have put us into this mess. He's pulled out of the very successful Iran nuclear deal, the JCPOA, which many of you helped us, who were helping to negotiate this deal, and thank you for your push to help make that deal become a reality. He's increased U.S. military presence in the region, and he surrounded himself with warmonger cabinet secretaries like Secretary of State Pompeo. Now, Mike Pompeo, who should be working on diplomacy to de-escalate and put us on the path to peace, seems to want war. Now, I serve as the State and Foreign Operations Vice Chair, which is the subcommittee of the Appropriations Committee that funds our diplomatic initiatives, and the State Department. Our subcommittee and the State Department is there to prevent wars and to look at how we can provide for the 2 pillars of the 3 pillars of our foreign policy. That's development and diplomacy. The Department of Defense provides that 3rd D, and that's the defense leg. But yet we see Secretary Pompeo actually acting in many ways as the Secretary of Defense. Let us be reminded also that as President Trump plunges the U.S. into the brink of war with Iran, Congress has yet again failed in our constitutional duty to weigh in on matters of war and peace. That's why, in addition to the War Powers Resolution that we're taking up, which I fully support, we progressives will continue to push for a repeal of the 2002 authorization to use military force, and I have that bill that I hope that you will help us get co-sponsors of. That's H.R. 2456, and the 2001 AUMF, H.R. 1274, both which I have introduced over and over and over and over again. and also to support Congressman Connor's bill that says no funds with Iran unless the administration comes to Congress and we authorize the use of force. So I hope you will encourage your members of Congress to co-sponsor all of these bills, and we need more support. And let me just tell you, as the only member to vote against the 2001 AUMF, I fear that this 60-word authorization, that's what the 2001 was, 60 words, that it would open the door for any president to wage war anywhere in the world without congressional debate or vote. And in the almost 19 years since, this blank check has been used for war everywhere. It's been used over, I believe it's 41 times in 19 countries, according to the Congressional Research Service, and that's in a declassified report. And also, the 2002 authorization to use military force was an authorization that was used then as the debate emerged around weapons of mass destruction. It was based on the lies that was told by the Bush administration that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. That's what that 2002 authorization was about. And of course, many of us voted against that because we knew there were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. And it's outrageous that this administration is continuing to somehow use this as one of the legal basis for their military actions and assassination. And so we have got to repeal the 2002 authorization to use military force immediately. We're working on that. And also the 2001 authorization. Our shared work to prevent another endless war is very clear. We must stand up, we must march, we must sound the alarm, and we must stop this reckless president. So I hope that all of you will be empowered by tonight's call to stop this march towards war tomorrow at the rally. And we have to remember that peace is patriotic. And central to our democracy is the right to petition our government to act in accordance to the requirements of our Constitution. So thank you again for giving me a chance to join this very critical call. And I just want to thank you for being the resistance that this world needs at this point, and to continue to hold this administration, especially Donald Trump, accountable. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Representative Lee. I mean, I can't imagine where we would be without your leadership. We're incredibly grateful. For those on the call, as a reminder, if you're on the phone, you can press *3 to ask a question, and you'll be connected to one of our call screeners, and there will be time for questions later in the call. So next up, I want to introduce Stephen Miles. He's Executive Director of Win Without War. It's an organization founded in 2002 to oppose the U.S. invasion of Iraq. And since then, Win Without War has become a powerful organizational leader in the progressive anti-war community. Thank you so much for being here, Stephen.
Thank you, Rana. You know, there's an old saying I'm reminded of that Barbara Lee speaks for me, and I think tonight we just had a reminder of why that is. So thank you, Congresswoman. I'd also like to thank Senators Warren, Senator Sanders, who will be joining us, Representative Khanna later, all my fellow speakers. But most importantly, I want to thank everyone calling in tonight. It's been less than 1 week since Donald Trump took his largest step yet towards war with Iran. But the truth is that since day one of his administration, he's been racing towards a horrific war of choice. Trump chose to walk away from diplomacy and the successful Iran nuclear deal. He chose to fill his cabinet with warmongers like Mike Pompeo. And he's chosen time and again conflict and maximum pressure with the very goal of causing human suffering. When Donald Trump took office, as my friend Jamal said earlier, we had the best chance in a generation for peace and decreasing war in the Middle East. Even more heartbreaking, over the last few weeks, we've seen real people-powered movements in Iraq and Iran fighting for change and true peace. Now war is threatening to stifle those dreams and undermine efforts for peace and justice in the Middle East as well as here at home. While we've avoided the worst-case scenario over the past few hours, we're not out of the woods yet. We are only one tweet or change of Donald Trump's heart away from being right back on the brink of all-out war. That is not okay. Thankfully, we have the power to change that. With a massive showing of people power tomorrow, we can stiffen the spines of our leaders in Congress who are working to build roadblocks to war. If enough of us demand action when the House votes tomorrow, we can force them to, we can win that vote. And after that, we can force the Senate to vote next and then we can beat warmongers like Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham. And if we make our chorus for peace loud enough, we can even show Donald Trump just how united we all are against his war and convince him to keep de-escalating. But again, we're not out of the woods. Just today, Donald Trump announced he's going to add even more sanctions which will cause even more harm to everyday people already reeling from maximum pressure. Donald Trump said today that he wants peace, but we know that at a moment's notice, he may again choose to launch an attack that could escalate towards war. And after years of flooding the Middle East with United States-made weapons, there's a real chance that at any moment, one bomb or one missile can spark an inferno that causes yet another conflict and yet more war in a region already on fire. The truth is, if we want to end our nation's endless wars, now is the time to do that. No one is going to do our work for us, and no one's going to hear us if our voices are silent. I cannot wait to be out in the streets with all my friends on this call tomorrow saying no war with Iran, and I hope you'll be out there with us.
Thank you, Stephen. We have a couple more speakers coming up, everyone, but first I want to just give another shout out to the incredible folks that helped organize this call, especially our allies at Indivisible. Indivisible has been an incredible partner since they were founded in early 2017, and we're so grateful for their leadership. And again, Stephen at Win Without War, Jamal at National Iranian American Council, and Brittany at About Face Veterans Against the War. So before we go to our next speaker, I want to ask a question, and this question will be for Brittany. Rachel, who works in public health, she is concerned that we will see a resurgence of what we saw when things began in Iraq. She wants to know, what do we do to prepare, prevent, and help if we begin seeing more backlash towards Iranian Americans? And I'm sorry, I correct myself. That's a question for Jamal. What do we do to prepare, prevent, help if we begin seeing more backlash towards Iranian Americans?
It's been really helpful to have allies in Congress stepping up for us. So with what happened at the border this past weekend, we had allies, Pramila Jayapal, Ro Khanna, and others who intervened with DHS and with Border Patrol to really hold their feet to the fire. And as we saw with the Muslim ban, it was the same thing. It was members of Congress stepping up to help us out. And then, if things get bad, we're also going to need legal action, just like we did with the Muslim ban. And so, supporting those efforts, the efforts of groups like Iranian American Bar Association and ACLU, but also just the support of our communities in helping to fundraise for those types of efforts is really important. The most important thing is just vigilance. I mean, the minute we start taking for granted that these rights can be eroded and we don't have the solidarity and support of our community, that's when we really start to lose those rights forever. And so just, being with us in solidarity and having our backs is just really helpful and appreciated.
Thank you. So in a few moments, we're going to hear from Senator Bernie Sanders. But before we turn over the mic, just wanted to share that close to 900 folks on this call are in the military or veterans or in military families. That was our last poll. And then I wanted to ask who here is planning to attend an event tomorrow night to make visible the anti-war majority. You can find an event near you at nowarwithiran.org, because we need to make sure Congress hears us loud and clear that we do not support a march to war. So if you're on the phone, please let us know how you're planning to take action this week. You can press 1 if you are planning to attend an event in your community tomorrow night at 5 p.m. local time. You can press 2 if you are willing to host an event in your community tomorrow night at 5 p.m. local time. And you please press 3 if you're not able to attend or host an event, but you're committed to calling your member of Congress. So those poll results will come in, and then we will shortly, we'll take one more question and then go to Senator Sanders. All right. So this question is for Brittany. I keep losing my questions. Give me 1 minute. What can a soldier who is completely opposed to the war but is currently deployed in the Middle East, do in this moment?
That's a really good question, and one that many, many members of About Face, Veterans Against the War, were facing at one point, or are facing as well. My recommendation would be to reach out to various communities of veterans that, align with your views. And many of us are here to offer support. I know that you don't have to be a member of About Face to reach out to us, for us to just, be vets to talk to. And then I, most importantly, would recommend the GI Rights Hotline. It's a really great way. It's confidential. It's run by civilians who have expertise in this and will help you talk through your various options for, what you can do, conscientious objector status, all kinds of things. And I wasn't deployed, but I was still under contract, and I was in those shoes and reached out to them myself, and it was really helpful. So definitely recommend that as a resource.
Thank you so much. And so far, it looks like we have over 800 folks in this last poll that just committed to attending an event tomorrow. Over 70 of you are committing to host one, and over 800 of you are committing to call your Congress member. And I'll just encourage every single person on this call tonight. I really hope that you can commit to calling your member of Congress and telling them to stop the escalation towards war and return back to diplomacy. All right. So now I am honored to introduce our next speaker, and that is Senator Bernie Sanders from the great state of Vermont. He is on the line with us tonight. And while Senator Sanders needs no introduction, I just want to say the senator has been incredibly steadfast in his anti-war record. And we thank you so much for being with us here tonight. Senator Sanders, take it away.
Rhonda, thank you so much for what you and Move On are doing in this very, very dangerous moment in American history. And I think back in my lifetime to the disastrous wars, the unnecessary wars that have taken place. I think back to Vietnam, where people I knew got killed, where my generation suffered so terribly. 59,000 dead, God knows how many wounded, people still sleeping out on the streets today from that war. And you know what? That war was created by a series of lies. We should never have gotten into that war. And as a young man, I remember marching in Washington against the war. And more recently, back in 2002, 2003, I remember the war in Iraq. And, I was a member of the Congress, and I heard all the lies that came from Rumsfeld and the Vice President Cheney and from Bush and everybody else about how Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, all lies. And we went to war, and 4,500 brave American soldiers never came back. Hundreds of thousands of Iraqis died. I'm the former chairman of the Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs, and I've talked to so many veterans and mothers and wives who have lost their loved ones, people today still suffering from PTSD. So I think the lesson is that war should be avoided in every way that we can. War is the last response, not the first response. And what I'm seeing today from Trump is the same old, the same lies, and an effort for whatever reason, and who can fathom what goes on in his mind, to get us into another war. I will do everything that I can to prevent this war. I will certainly be working, as I have in the past. As you may know, I worked very hard with some conservative Republicans for the first time in American history to use the War Powers Act to get the U.S. out of the horrific war in Yemen led by the dictatorship of Saudi Arabia. And we actually passed the resolution in the House and the Senate. It was vetoed by Trump. And we're going to take up that cause again. I'll be working to make sure that we pass a War Powers Act which makes it clear that the Constitution says that it is the Congress, not the President, who determines whether this country goes to war. And that, I'm afraid, Congress has forgot about that under Republican and Democratic administrations, and we're going to do everything we can to pass that resolution. And also, I am the lead sponsor, along with Ro Khanna from California in the House, of a very important bill which basically defunds any effort for Trump to take us into war in Iran. You can't go to war unless you have money, and we're going to prevent them from having money. So I want to thank MoveOn for their efforts in rallying the American people against this war. You know, aside from everything else, aside from the loss of life and the destabilization of the Mideast, you know, this country, as all of you know, has enormous needs. We got 87 million people without any health insurance or underinsured. We got 500,000 people sleeping out on the streets tonight. We have to take on climate change and transform our energy system and invest in that. We have to invest in affordable housing, invest in education. You know what we don't have to invest in? We don't have to invest in another endless war. So I look forward to working with all of you. And thank you very much for what you're doing. Let's go forward and let's stop this war. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Senator Sanders. We really appreciate your time with us here tonight. Up next, I would like to introduce Representative Ro Khanna from the beautiful state of California. Representative Khanna will be talking to us about public support and how essential it is to getting Congress to stop Trump's war.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to follow Senator Sanders. As he mentioned, we have legislation that would defund any ability of the Trump administration to make offensive war with Iran or Iranian officials. And I appreciate so much MoveOn's advocacy, not just against the war in Iran, but consistently against these endless wars over the past 18 years. It's important to note that we had actually passed this amendment to defund any action against Iran in the National Defense Authorization a couple months ago. That passed with 27 Republican votes in the House, including the Matt Gaetz, Mark Meadows, Jim Jordan, some of the president's closest allies. And it had a majority support in the Senate. Yet the Pentagon fought tooth and nail to try to strip that bill. And some of us, like Senator Sanders and I, argued that we cannot continue to give the Pentagon their massive budget, $738 billion, if they are not going to have an amendment to restrict them from having an offensive strike in Iran. We lost that battle, and ultimately Congress voted overwhelmingly to pass the National Defense Authorization as a blank check. I believe if that amendment had been in there, this would have been avoided. The Pentagon would never have given the Soleimani option to the president if there was an explicit bipartisan prohibition against doing so, or if they still hadn't gotten their funding, which they so desperately wanted. The reason that history is important is it's time, in my view, for Congress to exercise the power of the purse. And we have not been willing to do that. We did not do that to prevent the escalation in Iraq. We did not do that to prevent the escalation of troops in Afghanistan. At the end of the day, the one power Congress has is the power to defund offensive wars. And our bill, Senator Sanders and my bill, called for the defunding of any offensive strategy. But the point is, even if it doesn't pass and get the president's signature, it sets a marker that during the appropriations process, Congress can still do this. Ultimately, the president needs funding, and that's those funding bills start in the House of Representatives, and we need to fight in that process to defund anything. Let me make one final point. When historians look back at this effort, they will wonder not just about the morality, not just about the constitutionality, but they will wonder what in the world was America thinking in terms of our strategic interests. The reality is that the war on terror, which has been going on for 18 years, has led to terrorism increasing and spreading around the world. It has cost this country trillions of dollars. China has not been in a war since 1979. We have been in over 40 conflicts since then. The entire economy of the Middle East is 3.5% of world GDP. Iran is at 0.44% of world GDP. We are at 21%. China is at 15%. What in the world are we doing pouring trillions of dollars into these wars in the Middle East, starting potentially another confrontation with Iran, which is 0.44% of world GDP, and at the same time neglecting an investment in the infrastructure, in the education, in the healthcare, in the research and development of our own nation? We need to be confident in our view that the prolonged war on terror has hurt America's national interest, that our foreign policy vision of restraint and investment in our people and our nation is not just morally right, but it's what will allow America to be stronger and succeed in the 21st century. And I appreciate so much Move On efforts, not just to stop this war, but to help articulate a new foreign policy vision for our party and our country.
Thank you so much, Representative Khanna. We appreciate your leadership and everything you're doing on this issue and many others.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so have a wonderful evening. We have a couple more speakers, one more speaker, and then we're going to take a set of questions. So we are seeing a lot of questions online right now from people who want to take action and aren't sure where to start. So I'm going to introduce a very committed and wonderful Move On member. Fallon L. is a grassroots activist in Port St. Lucie, Florida. And Fallon, I'm hoping you can answer the question, I want to take action, but where do I start and how can I be the most helpful?
Sure, thank you. My name is Fallon. I'm speaking to you all from my home in Port St. Lucie, Florida, which is part of the Treasure Coast in Southeast Florida and the 18th Congressional District. In 2018, I was a busy stay-at-home mom to two little girls, and like I think so many of us, I had spent the previous 2 years yelling at my TV and feeling like I needed to do something, but not sure exactly what. So I was actually compelled to get involved when Donald Trump announced in May 2018 that he was pulling the United States out of the Iran nuclear deal. So that's when I knew that yelling at the TV was not enough. I had to do something. So I started by volunteering on a local campaign, and I joined Move On. Through these efforts, I was able to find my community. I began organizing with the support of my community and the support of this amazing Move On community that has embraced me and provided me with all the tools that I needed to organize successfully. Since 2018, I've organized dozens of actions and have helped to build and maintain a strong activist community here on the Treasure Coast. And tomorrow, I'll be joining our Treasure Coast community in solidarity with activists nationwide to oppose war with Iran and ensure that the anti-war majority is visible during these critical moments of escalating tensions. In the wake of Iran's retaliatory missile attacks last night, it's more important than ever that we, the anti-war majority, make ourselves visible and send a message to this administration and our members of Congress that we will not be forced into another war and that we are watching them closely as they make their next move. So I need everyone on this call to join me in this effort. Will you join me tomorrow, January 9th, to make the anti-war majority in this country visible and join or host a No War with Iran event in your community?
Thank you so much, Fallon. We are so grateful for you. And I just think your story is so similar to so many Move On members, Indivisible members, folks that are members of various progressive organizations out there that really want to make an impact and make this world a better place. And we're so happy you decided to, as you say, get off the couch one day and get active. So thank you so much. I want to say a few things before we close that are very important. We had two questions, actually several questions, that Austin in Maryland asked, are Trump's actions against Iran further grounds for impeachment? And then Sharon, two Maryland folks, Sharon in Maryland also asked, I marched in the run-up to the war with Iraq. What can we learn from the resistance that was put up for that so that we can have a better chance at stopping this war? So a couple of things on those points before we close out. Trump's actions against Iran are just an additional reason for the Congress to take up a fair Senate trial on impeachment. They won't be changing the articles based on his violations here, but it is just another proof point of the fact that he has been abusing his oath of office, and he's a danger and a threat to the safety of our national security and our democracy. And then in terms of what we learned from the run-up with the Iraq War and all the work we did as a community to put an end to war, I'll say this is slightly a different moment. The memories of the Iraq War are living in all of us here in this country. There are families that still live with the impacts of the Iraq War. There are people that are still stationed there. So I would say the people of this country know, and they have recent memory of how dangerous and harmful war is. And so we have clearly an already established anti-war majority in this country. The vast majority of people in this country are against war and they're for diplomacy. The challenge we have in this moment is that we have to make that visible. And that's why tomorrow is so important, and other efforts that will be led along the way. It's important that you show up physically, visibly, to show your opposition to March to War. So I want to thank all of our speakers for joining tonight and thank everyone here. Please go to nowarwithiran.org and find an event near you to attend tomorrow. And if you are not able to, and even if you are, everyone on this call, please call your member of Congress and tell them, no war with Iran, pull back from the brink of war, we must de-escalate now. Later this week, we'll post the audio recording, live stream link, a transcript of the call, and a PDF of the slideshow to moveon.org/no-war-call. And you're welcome to go get notes from there. Thank you all. Thank you for everything you do. And I'm so honored that you all joined us this evening and everything that you do to make this world a better place. Have a wonderful evening.